Good morning, MathTubers. Today we're taking a look at the math shelf. I'm just going to give a quick tour of what we have and talk about it a little bit. I'll go into more detail in some other videos as to the materials that are chosen and why they're chosen and all of that kind of stuff. But today I just wanted to give a quick overview of the math shelf. We only have one math shelf. It is an entire shelf just for math, but just the one. So we'll flip the camera around and we'll get started on looking at the math shelf. Okay, so that's our entire math shelf in one shot. They still haven't come to fix the leaks in this room, so our language shelf is still kind of pulled away from the wall and in the way of everything. But there's our math shelf. So again, we start at the top left-hand side and we go across just like we were reading a book. And just like we're reading a book, we're going to stop in the center here and go to the next shelf and then so on and so on. And just like a book, we go to the next page and we start at the top and go down again. Each shelf is designed that way to reinforce that concept of left to right, top to bottom, left back to the top, left to right, top to bottom. So let's go look over here. So we're starting with Sandpaper Numbers, which is what's in this box here, the green cards. And that's a tactile experience of learning what the numbers are and what they look like and how to write them. Next is some bead stair with a little rug. There's no numbers on that because it's just for counting. Next is a little puzzle that we got, probably from the dollar store. It's a little bit confusing sometimes because like this one is number 6. No, this one is number 9, right? So that's confusing. But then you count the water drops. Sometimes my daughter wants to count the watering can and there's only one of it. So that can be confusing sometimes. I wish they had done different pictures, but that's just my picky Montessori teacher brain, and I know the difference in how these things should be set up to make them less confusing and to eliminate these kinds of confusions. But, you know, for the meantime, while we're just counting, and she knows now that she counts the water drops because we've talked about it, so it's not a big deal. If I was in a classroom, I wouldn't choose that just because I can't, you know, be there with every child all the time to reinforce what to count. So I would choose something that was less confusing. Next is the hanging bead frame, which you can see is done beautifully. So these are all usually in this little triangle right here. And this is the third thing on the shelf because while it has numbers, they're not mixed up. They're in a fixed order. So she can't, once she knows what these numbers are, she can't mix them up and accidentally put 8 in the middle here because it's a fixed order. So that makes the control of error more concrete, and it makes it easier for her to see the control of error because it eliminates the need to put the numbers in order before you can count. We'll talk a little bit more about that at another time. So next is a job with just, it's got objects for them to count and a couple of options, and then they pick the option that describes how many there are. So this one is 2, and then they put this on the number 2. Of course, that would be on their rug, and they would set this up. This is a really big job because it's got all these cards. There's one for each number. So to put this on a rug and lay all the cards out, it's actually a really big job, and that's kind of fun, you know, to have something that takes up that much space. Next is just more counting, but similar to this one, we have the bead stair and we have numbers, but there's no fixed order. So this is a lot more difficult. It comes at a time when a child has learned what the numbers are and what they represent, that this is 0 and that this is 3 and so on. They know that so that they can put these in order and then count the beads to go with them. I would not ask a child to do this job who was still practicing up here because they haven't learned all the letters, or I'm sorry, the numbers, and it's not fair to ask them to put these in order when they haven't even learned what each one is and represents. So that's why it's down here on the second shelf. Next is some counting matching. Again, the numbers are not in a fixed order, although the quantities are just like this. So when you pick this up, this is 3. It's always going to be 3. You can't change this to another number. You can't accidentally, well, you can accidentally count it wrong, but it's always going to represent 3. Same with these. These are always, that's always going to be 6. because there's 6 cherries and you can't change that. And so these two jobs, excuse me, are very similar in that they have an unfixed order of numbers that they need to put out, and then they have a fixed number of things to count and sort. Next is our homemade versions of the teen board and then the 10 board. I just printed up some materials and laminated them, and we'll go over those at another time, I'm sure of it. And then at the bottom is some addition work, some very simple addition work. I got these flashcards and just cut them out and laminated them, put the answer on the back for a control of error. And then usually there's a counting, there's a little bucket of counters right here. I think it just got moved around. So they would take this out, count 5 things, count 8 things, and then slide it to the bottom and count all together and decide what it was. If they got 13, then they would check it and they would see if their answer was right. They would put their objects on this, so this is how it would look. They would count their 5 things right here and their 8 things right here, and then they would slide them all down to the bottom and they would count them all together to see how many they got. And then they would turn this over and check their answer. So I think it used to be like tiny erasers from the dollar spot at Target. So, and then, excuse me. These are the addition boards, which I have printed out a paper copy of and laminated onto paper. These lines here are where they put equations. They just pick out 9 equations and they lay them out, and then they find the answers in here. This is a really daunting task because there's a lot to do in there. It takes a long time, takes a lot of concentration. So I might not necessarily introduce these things simultaneously because this is a lot more difficult than this. I might have them practice other things before coming to this, but it's here because it's single digit addition. And the next thing that we're doing is the golden bead material, which is all working in hundreds and thousands and all of that business. So because this is single digits, I kept it here on the first side. Next, we come up to the top of the shelf again, except on the second side. And you can see this is our golden bead introduction tray, and it's actually missing our unit bead. Sorry, that's gonna bother me, so now I have to fix it. So there's a little bucket there and a unit bead. So this is just an introduction. This is how we teach them the names of the materials that they'll be using for the rest of this shelf. And so that's very important. They need to know the names of these things in order to do the rest of the shelf accurately. And then we have some other bead materials here that we're, just kind of holding onto and prepping for. My son is not there yet, and my daughter's not there yet. My oldest has moved way beyond that. So it's just kind of sitting there waiting to be called into action. Next we have gathering, and that's what this tray is here. We can talk about that in another video. I can do a video on how we do that job. And then this is another one that I found at Ross that's similar setup. It has 100 squares and 10 bars. And then they have to count this up. So this is 310. And then they find 310 and they put it together and see if it matches. Again, this is another one that takes up a lot of space on the shelf or on the rug because that's a lot of different numbers to count out, and that's a lot of different puzzle pieces to put out. So that can be kind of fun. This is our bank. So all of our golden bead materials are stretched out here. And then the very bottom is the numbers. You can see they're waiting to be called to action because neither of my younger ones are doing this job yet. So putting the numbers in the folders and hanging them up somewhere just isn't a priority. And it's a space issue. We don't have the space to hang them right now. So I'm just not worried about it. Until they're using it regularly, it's gonna stay right where it's at. So that's a look at our math shelf in its entirety. Next time we will peek over here to that white shelf and we'll see what's on the piece shelf. But for now, that's our math shelf. I hope that you enjoyed seeing it a little bit, and if there's anything on there that you really want me to go more in depth about, please drop me a comment and let me know which one it is, and I will try to rearrange my videos and get you squared away with what you want to learn. Thanks for watching, guys.